I wanted to do a little book review today on a book that I sort of just stumbled upon. I think I was looking around at modern classic books to read, and I think I also like came across videos about people talking about like Jane Austen and Jane Eyre, because Jane Eyre is one of my favorite books, and I have tried reading 3 of Jane Austen's books, but I haven't been able to sort of get into it, and I think I was watching a lot of videos on kind of like what to expect before reading Jane Austen and like how to read Jane Austen. Basically, a lot of people do those kind of videos when it comes to like classics, and I came across Books and Things, Katie from Books and Things video where she was talking about classic books that inspired the book that she wrote. And I think it came up because she mentions the Bronte sisters, who, as I said, Jane Eyre is one of my favorite books, and I think that's why that video came up. And I was watching it and I was like, oh, I didn't know she wrote a book. And I kind of went back through her videos because I do follow her, but I don't really watch BookTube all that much anymore, just because I get a lot of my books secondhand. So all of the books you see behind me, the majority of them are secondhand, so I don't really have a choice in what books I find in secondhand shops. So I don't really watch too many BookTube videos anymore, because I'm like, well, I mean, it's not like I'm gonna, like, unless I'm gonna like go out and actually buy it brand new, I'm probably never gonna find all these new books that everyone's talking about. Anyway, so I realized that she wrote a book, and the way she was describing it, I was like, that sounds like something that I am in the mood to read, because I love reading books that are set in the 1800s. I think it would be like considered Victorian, but I also like the later years of the 1800s, so like Thomas Hardy and stuff like that. I like that time period where it's like 1870s, 1880s kind of thing, all the way back to maybe like Jane Eyre, so like 1840s ish. Anywhere back from Jane Eyre I'm still struggling with, but hopefully I'll eventually get to it. Anyway, so I long-winded, but I read Katie's book, The Secrets of Hartwood Hall, and it didn't take me that long to read, and I really enjoyed this book, so I kind of wanted to talk about it with you, hoping that you would also pick it up, because it's a really good historical fiction. So this book is about this main character named Mrs. Lennox. Her name's Margaret, and she takes up a position as governess for this family that lives sort of in the middle of nowhere in this estate called Hartwood Hall. When she gets to the village, she realizes that Hartwood Hall isn't really in the village. It's sort of like a little bit away from the village, so the villagers don't really venture up that far, and also she discovers that the people in Hartwood Hall don't really go into the village all that much either. So in this house, big house, there is the lady of the house, Mrs. Evesham. There is a young 10-year-old boy named Louis. We have a butler, we have a housekeeper, we have a servant girl, like a cleaner girl, I don't know what they're called, and then we have a cook and a kitchen hand girl and a gardener named Paul. So it's not that much when you really think of how big this place is. Anyway, so she is really excited to become a governess again, because we realize that she is actually a widow. So her husband passed away not that long ago, and so she is sort of forced to go back to sort of working. And throughout the book there are some secrets, there are some mysteries, and I don't know if I want to say too much more, because I honestly didn't know that much going into it, and I was really happy with the fact that I didn't know that much, because yeah, a lot happens. I will say that this book is that kind of gothic literature kind of vibe. So what I mean by that is it's really ominous, it's really atmospheric, it's a pretty slow, and it's also very what's the word I'm looking for? For some reason I can't think of the word that I'm trying to say, but it's kind of that vibe of like, you see this in a lot of gothic literature where it's like you don't know if something is supernatural or it's not supernatural. So that is kind of the vibe of this book, and I think that's my favorite part about this book. I really like that we don't know until the very end, until like the last quarter of this book, we don't know if it's all in her head, if it's a supernatural thing, or if it's a like an actual person that's doing all these suspicious, mysterious things. The other thing that I really like about this book is how much of it is very character driven. I don't read a lot of historical fictions, and I was kind of expecting it to be very like plot heavy, which is not usually something that I really like that much. I mean, obviously I do like a little bit of plot, that's why I read thrillers and, you know, and romances and stuff, but I thought that the thriller and the mystery aspect of this book was going to be kind of the main part. It is, but it also doesn't feel like it is, because our main character has some secrets of her own. I do think that we do follow her, like we get to know her a lot throughout this book as she's trying to get to know the people around her, and I really like that aspect, because it is just very in her head, very character driven, and yeah, I like her as a person, because I think she's, I don't want to like compare her to any other sort of characters, but Katie did say in her like video where she mentions all the books that inspired her to write this book, I could definitely see little bits and pieces of that in the main character and in this book, but not in like a standout way where you can't unsee it, if that makes sense. It's definitely its own book. It's definitely like, it has the tropes of what you're familiar with, but it kind of does something completely different to it, especially towards the end. I was very surprised towards the end. I think the main part that I really like about this book is I can tell how much research was done to write this book, and it definitely shows, and it feels very authentic. It feels very of that time. A lot of the times when I've read historical fictions that are written in modern times, like our time now, but it's supposed to be set back in the day, a lot of the times you can't help but notice the modern things that are used, whether it be like in the writing or just like certain aspect of it is like there's kind of like a slip. I didn't feel that at all reading this book. I think the author did a really good job in her research for this book, and the research of the time period, and the research of just the way the household works, the way the governorship works, the way people interact with each other. I just thought that everything was so authentic. And I think what I really like, and I think this is something that is going to push me into reading more historical fictions, is that the issue I have with reading books from the 1800s is the sentence structure. Not necessarily the language, because I don't think the language is too hard, but it is, you do find that a lot of classic books and a lot of books set, written in that time period, is very, the way people wrote were very long-winded, and long sentences and big paragraphs, and I think sometimes that makes me not want to read it, because I just feel like it's like a lot of words, because I'm so used to like modern day writing where I'm like short and sweet, you know, like not too short, but do you know what I mean, like concise. People back then did not write concisely, in my opinion, and so I think what I really enjoyed about this one was it gave me all the feels and the vibes and the atmosphere, and just all the information of what was happening back in the 1800s, but with a relatively modern and easy to read sentence structure, if that makes sense. Like, it's not too modern that it takes you out of it, but it's, you know, she uses the right words for that time period, but it, you know, the sentences are still shorter and easier to read, I guess. And I think that's, you know, my favorite part about reading this. So yeah, I think if you're into historical fiction, if you're into Jane Eyre, if you're into, I think, Shirley Jackson, you might actually really enjoy this. It has that ominous kind of haunted house kind of story that we all love, but it like is a really interesting take on it. Yeah, I think that's all I'm gonna say. Anyway, please read this. I highly recommend. It's really good, and I hope you're having a great day, and I'll see you next time.